that, I'd like to introduce Janessa Douds.
Hi, I'm Janessa Douds, and I am a candidate for the Emerging Media, Studio Art, and Design Master of Fine Arts degree. Welcome to my thesis defense, The Threshold of Experience, Critiquing the Self and Society Through Domestic Exploration. Thank you for attending. First, I'd like to thank my committee chair and mentor, Carla Poindexter, my committee members, Nick Klemba and Jason Burrell, and I give a special thanks to Erica Sobrak. I'd also like to thank the UCF Gallery staff for their contributions to making this show possible, my best friend, Kay Hopday, my parents, and my cohort and studio mates for their unwavering support. In the ruins where the home once stood, in the place where the beloved once spoke, gazing toward the dark house by which once more I stand, here in the long, unlovely street, the body, with its collection of memories and desires, touches a world that is retained only in the alcoves of phantom flesh. Possessed by its own anonymity, the world assumes an unnerving presence, familiar but other, and at all times apprehended by the vigilant but nameless watch of an eye without a face, whose shadow articulates the knowledge that this place is haunted. There is a light on in the closet where there shouldn't be. It illuminates the door, but no further. The dark is wide and it is empty. Where will it take me? Do I want to go? The light has lost its inviting hue and turned into something unfamiliar. If I crawled through, where would I come out? I often fear the door would become open and I would face that cavernous dark, that gaping maw which threatened to swallow me whole. It wouldn't spit me out, so I made myself leave. Now, I am looking in, safe with the darkness at my back. But am I? Enclosed in the cage of a porch, an unforgiving embrace that forces me to seek comfort elsewhere, in the never clear, always smudged glass of the door that isn't there. Part of it remains, distorting the scene inside. But are the shapes I see in the darkness an illusion? Buoyed by the lamp, I do not feel threatened. Back inside, there is, I have found, nowhere to go. There is no escape. The shape that remains behind, an imprint of nothing that appears from everything, stands across from me. When I turn, it disappears. Oftentimes, there is no shape or shadow cast. There are only stark lit walls and surfaces that seem empty. Are they empty though? Even a ghost will announce its presence. I close the blinds at night because what if someone is looking in? I can't see them, but they can see me. Rarely, when the light from inside hits just right, I only see myself peering in. In this thesis presentation, I explore my artistic practice, where I investigate theories of home, the phenomenology of space, and the uncanny, where the familiar becomes unfamiliar and the ordinary transforms into an enigmatic realm. Through domestic environments, I challenge conventional perceptions of space and confront the eerie in the everyday to reflect on how those spaces shape our emotional and psychological experiences. Haunting can be seen as intrinsically resistant to the contraction and homogenization of time and space. It happens when a place is stained by time, or when a particular place becomes a site for an encounter with broken time. I entered this MFA program continuing a body of work I began in my undergrad here, which explored exterior portions of my home and depicted them with exaggerated color. With these first few paintings, I aimed to accurately portray the same level of discomfort I felt at this time in my life. Fresh out of undergrad, navigating my early 20s, and starting a master's program was all new territory for me that I had to confront. The visual clutter was enough at first. My house, especially my back porch, is always in a perpetual state of reorganization, in between projects, or simply a result of life lived between myself and my parents. These arrangements are all happenstance, and, while poignant, seem to tell a story I didn't want told. As an intensely private person, this much of my life exposed was too much. I was uncomfortable, but not in a way that would help me. So, I began to remove objects and portions of the compositions, leaving them the fluorescent red of the underpainting. This drew attention to how I wanted it drawn. I continued to examine color and the same space on my porch several times from several angles. More and more of the local color peeled back until I realized that the daytime offered too many distractions, not only visually, but mentally. Standing outside in my backyard, I can feel the lingering heat of a late fall, the cool whisper of a breeze. I hear the insistent chatter of cicadas, and behind me, vaguely, my neighbor taking their dog out. And I wonder, as I gaze into the clutter of my back porch, when was the last time I cleaned the litter box tucked in the far corner? Should I bring that drying rug directly in line of the sun in yet? What about the snake plant? Did I water it? I am so outside of the moment that I am not present in it. I subscribe to the theory that there are no fixed points in time, which means that everything that has already happened is still happening now. The past exists within the present. In writer Su Zhao's words, I am every age I have ever been. In my childhood home that I have lived in since I was 4, now at the age of 25, I exist in the same rooms I existed in at the age of 6, 12, 16, and 20. How haunting. Haunt, in this case, meaning to visit often, to continually seek the company of, to recur constantly and spontaneously, to appear continually, and to visit or inhabit as a ghost. At night, when it's late and I can't sleep, I walk room from room, checking if windows are closed and drapes are pulled shut, glancing at furniture and piled objects that look like a shadow of a figure. With minimal light, everything just becomes quiet. To achieve this quiet, I hone down from visually complex to more minimal compositions. Paring down helps the viewer to focus. It limits distractions and still gives me the familiarity that the more complex compositions afforded. The space itself is less recognizable, but the objects in the painting remain familiar and allow the viewer to enter in. It isn't clear at first what each subject is, which forces you to look longer and deeper. Paring down the compositions helped in my work, and so did using a more limited palette. And that limited palette mostly includes green. I work with reference photography for all my paintings. In the more visually complex paintings, the color I used originated from local color. I just heightened it. The same goes for the nighttime green paintings. The green was already there in the space, whether it was from a porch light, a night light, or the light already present. So it only made sense for me to heighten the green as well. Not only is the green attention-getting, but it also helps establish the otherworldly environment and immerse you in it. Even so, the color is only part of the equation. The composition does the rest. I take my reference photos sporadically and typically multiple at a time. I'll be going about my house at night and will have my attention caught by light shining from open blinds or shadows reflected on the wall. The instant I feel something, the painting is already formed in my mind. I just now need to photograph it. I take several photos of the same thing until I get the composition just right. Then, I only work from that singular photograph. I do not strictly copy the photograph. If I did, the painting would hold no interest for me. Instead, I transcend the photograph by exaggerating angles that the lens of my iPad camera already distorts, considering and changing scales of some objects and exaggerating shapes and shadows. Diverting from the photo, the act itself creates a new reality. It makes this space an entirely new space. One of the most popular comparisons I get with my work is its very back rooms. The back rooms are a fictional location originating from a 2019 4chan thread. One of the best known examples of liminal space aesthetic, the back rooms are usually portrayed as an impossibly large, extra-dimensional expanse of empty rooms, accessed by exiting reality. What is liminal space? Liminal spaces are empty or abandoned places that appear eerie, forlorn, and often surreal. They are commonly places of transition, such as stairwells, subway spaces, and hotel hallways, unsettlingly devoid of people. Liminality, in Latin, literally means threshold. It is the quality of ambiguity or disorientation that occurs in the middle stage of a rite of passage. During a rite's liminal stage, participants stand at the threshold between their previous way of structuring their identity, time, or community in a new way. I'm not interested in traditional public liminal spaces. I am more interested in liminality as it is defined within states of being, change, and transition. Physical like a doorway or a hallway, but also psychological like the period of adolescence. Overall, I am interested in exploring liminality within domestic environments where the private self becomes public while still maintaining privacy. When I began my green nighttime paintings, I looked to contemporary artist Salman Tor, who is quite famous for his own green paintings. He refers to the shades of green he uses, which range from emerald to viridian, as glamorous, poisonous, intoxicating, and nocturnal, denoting desire and transgression, and representing Baba's third space, which enables other positions to emerge and gives rise to something different, something new and unrecognizable, a new area of negotiation, of meaning and representation. While the subject of our work is different, our creation of a third space, for different reasons, remains the same. With Tor, I am interested in how he subverts reality by creating a new reality with color, shape, and light. Lit only by a dim nightlight, my living room appears menacing. Similar to Tor's paintings, shadows extend and become distorted, different, no longer immediately recognizable. The furniture follows suit. Curtains and couches and corners become indistinguishable hiding places. But for what? Or who? I can no longer recognize my surroundings. If I turn to see my shadow, would it remain the same? This new space, this new reality, is familiar, but not. One of the other ways that I explore liminality within my work is by working with a variety of sizes, often going from small to large within a startling leap. The majority of my paintings are 9 by 12 rectangles. At first, the smaller size was convenient as I learned how to build up layers and experiment with color, but it also allowed for a certain amount of intimacy, different from the same intimacy of a larger painting. After painting at such a small scale for so long, I needed to go big again, and found that now the larger scale, also slightly intimidating, was easier with my practice on the smaller paintings. Cover Me is one of the larger paintings I completed recently. In my practice, I explore size within my compositions as well. I make objects like a nightlight large, and large objects like doors or windows small. Making large things small and small things large makes you pay attention to it more and notice details you wouldn't have before. However, I pay equal attention to the space surrounding the object. Photographer William Eggleston photographs spaces, specifically ones often looked over, such as a counter in a diner, trash piled against a curb, or the ceiling fan in a friend's house in Greenwood, Mississippi. David Warner quotes, "His photographs transform the ordinary into distinctive, poetic images that eschew fixed meaning." Eggleston photographs ordinary objects with so much thought and care that they become extraordinary. I appreciate how he photographs everyday life. He has his son drive him around and stop the car to get out and take a photo of what catches his eye. Growing up in the American South, I recognize those same objects in my own home. What I appreciate about Eggleston's work is that it is more universal than belonging solely to the American South. I spent the first few years of my life in Maryland, and I recognize those same spaces and objects from that home as well, especially when they are as ubiquitous as a ceiling fan. Ceiling fans are important in my work. They are one of the signifiers that I use. Signifier objects are objects that are not only easily recognizable as what they are, but objects that can also belong to a viewer and exist in the viewer's home. Of course, it's not important that it is the exact same fan, but that it is recognizable. As a resident of near constantly hot and humid Central Florida, ceiling fans have been an ever-present companion in and outside of my home. In fact, I become so dependent on them that I cannot be in a room in my house without one on. As long as the fan is on, I'm cool. I'm comfortable. I hardly see a still fan in my house. If there is one, it means power has gone out for one reason or another. When the fan is still, it turns into something different, especially at night when I'm the only one up and awake. It is no longer an item of comfort, but of discomfort, looming over me, watching my every move. The light bulbs become eyes, not unlike the polished dome of a security camera, and even though the blades are stationary, I can almost hear their intimidating mechanical whirring. This observation followed me from the kitchen to the porch. Outside, it's like a vacuum. Light and sound have been sucked out into the unknown. With only the porch light, I can't see beyond the thin cage of the screen. Anything could be out there, but I'm not alone. Above me, the ceiling fan watches. Even when treating the subject and the space equally, I often can't help but want to remove the subject entirely so I can study it independently of its surroundings. For an object with such a weighty presence, the ceiling fan deserved a moment of its own. It needed to be larger than I have ever gone with previous ceiling fan paintings, even larger than its true scale. To make it even more unsettling, I lengthened several fan blades and removed the pull chain. Taking the ceiling fan out and isolating it helped me to find out what makes it so eerie. With the cutout, I can move it around any way I want. And, with hanging it this way, I realized why it creeped me out so much. In many of the rooms to my house, including the porch, the ceilings are slightly slanted. Therefore, any ceiling fan affixed to it will also be at an angle. Whether it's intentional or installed improperly, I don't know. But with each one, when it gets past the medium setting, there is a rattle. Faint enough to be dismissed, but strong enough to shake my convictions that the fan wouldn't fall down on me. In my practice, I work with wood, canvas, paper, and of course, acrylic paint. Throughout my time in the program, I experimented with different surfaces for my paintings. I began with wood, then transitioned to paper, then the canvas, and now I'm using all three. One thing I explored and experimented with most is my use of color. I studied color theory from books by Joseph Albers and Hans Hofmann. I make it a point not to use black or white in paintings, except for white highlights and instances of pure white, because black and white are the absence of color. You can see the difference in the vibrancy between these two paintings created a year and a half apart. In the left, I painted with black and white, creating a value scale of green. On the right, I did not use black or white and created a color scale with the different colors I used. Instead of black, I used Prussian blue, and instead of white, I used cadmium yellow light, or an applicable light color, such as light bismuth yellow or light phthalo green. As bismuth yellow and light phthalo green are created with white, I use them sparingly and often layer pure color on top. Then a majority of my palette is green. The only greens I use are turquoise green and lime green. Other than that, I make all my greens by layering cadmium yellow light and several shades of blue, ranging from Prussian blue, cobalt blue hue, and ultramarine blue. And I achieve tertiaries by layering blues and yellows on top of the fluorescent red underpainting. Fluorescent colors are, at their base, extremely bright lights. Fluorescents, like all colors, are visual representations of light. They're best described as extremely luminescent versions of primary and secondary colors. Fluorescent colors can only be chemically created. As a result, they're not included in the traditional color spectrum and were not discovered until the last century. However, neon and fluorescent colors have long existed naturally in a variety of life. For example, insects like fireflies, animals like the blue-ringed octopus, and plants like the coleus. What these three have in common is that their fluorescence serves as a warning sign to predators. It is believed that firefly bioluminescence evolved as such. When predators attack, fireflies start reflex bleeding and produce drops of blood filled with chemicals that are poisonous to said predators. The blue-ringed octopus is one of the most venomous oceanic creatures, and the essential oils coleus plants contain are toxic to dogs, cats, and other animals. This biological trait is called aposematism, where a dangerous or noxious organism, like a granular poison frog, advertises its dangerous nature to a potential predator. The predator, recognizing the dangerous organism as an unfavorable prey, therefore desists from attacking it. The term aposematism was coined in 1877 for the concept of warning coloration. I'm not trying to deter you from my work by using these fluorescent colors. In fact, I am trying to attract you to my work by using them. While aposematism deters animal attention, it grabs human attention. We are naturally drawn to brightly colored things. The fluorescents are enticing, unusual, eye-catching, and commandeering. While I am using it to imply a warning, I am also using it to grab attention. Unlike naturally occurring fluorescents, man-made fluorescents are produced from dyes surrounded by a polymer coating. The photoluminescence of these colors is caused by the absorption of ultraviolet radiation and shorter visible wavelengths, which are then emitted as longer wavelengths within the visible spectrum. These emissions appear as intense, brilliant color. In short, fluorescent pigments produce their own light. Along with color, light plays an equally important part in my work. So, how could I depict a strong sense of light with these fluorescents in nighttime paintings rather than daytime? I looked at historical painter Joseph Mallard William Turner. In Turner's work, seas and skies become otherworldly, but still recognizable. What is most stunning to me about Turner's work is his ability to capture light within these skies and seas, specifically his nighttime paintings like Fishermen at Sea. In it, the pale yellow moon illuminates a churning green-blue sea. This is one of Turner's darkest paintings, yet everything of necessity is visible. Nothing gets lost. Not the second boat cresting over the wave, not the hint of land in the distance, and not even the fleeting horizon line. Everything is treated with equal attention and purpose. Turner mastered this by balancing light and darkness in both visual composition and metaphor. They confront one another, creating an intense push and pull that is at the core of painting and the drama that night scenes denote. Here, in palette, I challenged myself with a direct light source, one so impossibly bright that it created the same intense push and pull that Turner achieved. Light is created by way of creating energy, by the juxtaposition of colors and the interaction of those colors. It's a kind of eternal light, or symbolic light, or light that is sustained by the energy of the interaction of color. When first using my palette of heightened colors back in undergrad, I studied artist Wayne Thiebaud, known for his brightly colored and handled confection paintings. The colors are unnatural, ones you would not expect to see in pies or cakes, but they bring his paintings to life. Not only do I study his palette, I also incorporate a concept he used and coined the term for, halation theory. This practice involves, within a painting, putting a color next to its opposite, such as a blue line next to a bright red line, as seen in his painting, Three Candied Apples. Not only is halation theory an excellent use and demonstration of color theory knowledge, it also gives his paintings a shimmer or glow. Thiebaud increased luminosity in his paintings just by using pure color as light. My painting, Now I'm Standing Outside Bathed in Porch Light, was an exercise in this theory. Not only did I begin with the red underpainting and build up layers of yellow, green, and blue on top of it, I also, like with many paintings, left areas of the underpainting exposed to directly complement the green I was putting on top of it, such as in the top left and right corners. Working directly with halation theory, however, I inserted thin red lines of that same color underpainting in certain areas of the painting, like the light fixture and the light bulb where it meets the green shadows. One of the challenges I faced when starting out on creating night scenes was how to build atmosphere. How can I make multi-dimensional darkness within a limited picture plane and only with paint? I looked at Mark Rothko. Rothko created paintings of colors next to colors and colors hidden within colors. The shapes of what appear to be purple and black and untitled are not just purple and black. Instead, they are built with layers upon layers of colors, such as oranges and blues, as seen in the bottom half of the painting. Rothko played with transparencies within his work, using the thinnest layers and washes of paint to build up such a rich atmosphere in such limited space. His paintings are loud. Colors vibrate where they meet one another in the thin universes between each field. colors you would not expect to see in a composition, hidden within each other, beckon us to come closer and to discover for ourselves the same wonder Rothko discovered when painting. Rothko achieved such a luminosity within his paintings that I admire. He, once again, did this by layering colors with each other, but more notably in the fractured edges of each field, achieved with tape and feathered brushstrokes. The different hues and values clash in a harmonizing way, and create a vibrating effect, which I tried to mimic with my painting Untitled. And this is me standing with Untitled this past summer at the National Gallery of Art in DC. In most of my paintings, a figure is notably absent. Initially, I introduced a figure into my work to answer the question, what if? And since some of the feedback I received at the time was that a few people struggled to enter into my work without one, I ran an experiment. The next time I took reference photos, I made sure to capture my shadow along with the environment instead of intentionally removing it or staying out of the shot. It could be me, it could be you, it could be someone behind you. It could be was all I could say. The shadow contains a lot of questions I wasn't able to answer then, but I can now. Who is the figure? It is me, it is you. This is a poem by author Christina Marie Brown that I remembered when I began exploring the shadowed figure in my work. Brown says, "There is a ghost in the house, but I have learned that the house is me, and the ghost is also me. My home is liminal because I am in it. Even outside, where there are no mirrors and late at night, no other witnesses, the porch light remains, and I cannot escape from myself." Memory is imbued in every inch of the spaces that I occupy. It's inescapable. One aspect of the figures in my work that I enjoy is that they open a door to speaking about memory. The Memory of Place, A Phenomenology of the Uncanny by Dylan Trigg is a philosophy book about memory and contains the quote I read at the beginning of my presentation. The book focuses more on memory as a function rather than an instance, by bringing memory and place together instead of the two remaining separate phenomena. Trigg describes how closely memory interacts with imagination. He quotes, "Alongside the concept of place, memory diffuses itself in several different pathways simultaneously, all of which are experienced from the inside out." One of the characteristics of liminal space is that it is uncanny. In Freud's essay, The Uncanny, he introduces the German terms Unheimlich and Heimlich. He describes the barrier between the two as Heimlich meaning familiar and Unheimlich meaning something which is concealed or kept out of sight. This barrier is what then brings the two together to form the uncanny, when something unfamiliar gets added to which is familiar. What is a poetic image? I define it as an image that invokes a certain or multitude of feelings that normally cannot be easily expressed with words. It is the sister to poetry, where the sole goal of the poem is to put into words what cannot be uttered. Gaston Bachelard in Poetics of Space discusses a poetic image as an immediate environmental perception that precedes conscious thought, imbuing it with properties beyond function and form, and affording the observer a state of daydreaming. The poetic image, Bachelard also states, will have a sonority of being. Sonority meaning a reverberation, an endless refrain of verses, or resonance. Think of a chord being struck and the echoing that lingers after the initial note. My ceiling fan, lit by a porch light and motionless in the night air, is a poem to me. How can this painting invoke an emotion when it is, in fact, just a ceiling fan? Why the poetic image? Why any image at all? Why domestic environments? Because I believe my imagery speaks to the sonority of being. With my paintings, I'm asking a viewer to confront the eerie within the seemingly ordinary and to consider their own perceptions of home and the psychological experiences we associate with it. I make this work because in recent years, I've noticed people seem unwilling not only to be uncomfortable, but to feel any emotion that isn't suitable for public consumption. But without the emotions meant only for ourselves, what kind of private self is left? And is the lack of private self a symptom, or sadly, the goal? A quality of life do you have if you go about life this way? You can't ignore yourself or your uncomfortable feelings. You must confront them. As I stated when I began my presentation, I started this program at a very uncomfortable time in my life. Writing about my paintings helped me put into words what I felt, not only when looking at them, but also just existing. And I find great comfort in the fact that many people can relate, whether it be through my paintings or writing, or both. During this program, I worked on pairing my own writing and poetry with my work, but I have also found other writings and poems by different authors that fit my work very well, such as this excerpt from a poem by writer May Sarton. Yes, I am home again, but home has changed, and I, within this cultivated space that I have made my own, feel at a loss, disoriented. All the safe doors have come unlocked, and too much light has flooded every room. Where can I go? In conclusion, my body of work has grown exponentially throughout my time in the program. I am finally at a place where I consider my work to be going in the direction I want it to be. I hope my work causes people to think and confront the uncomfortable feelings they deal with from looking at my work or not. These images are not meant to be frightening, they're meant to be evocative. If they happen to evoke fear, then they are successful. The concept is simple: 4 walls and a door, a room at the center that's not locked, but you don't leave anyway. A car in the driveway would starve if you tried it. The layout is something you should know intimately, and yet not at all. Pour over the blueprints, like a study of self, and outline of body and psyche. Start off with basic schematics. Ask the obvious questions. How big is the kitchen? The answer being, about as big as your heart. Does it have a basement? Sure, but only if your childhood home did. What about an attic? Maybe, if you know that you are hiding something from yourself. And a crawl space? Well, you've got veins too, don't you? And then lastly, redundantly, how many bedrooms? But you know that it doesn't really matter. Your brain isn't to be trusted here.
All right, would you like to start the questions?
Sure.
Nick?
Hello. Is this on? Yes, maybe.
It's being recorded.
Oh, okay. So thank you, Janessa. The first question I have is kind of in reference to the exhibition as a whole. So I'd like to hear you kind of talk more about why you configured the work as it exists right now in this space, and kind of go into detail and specifics in some of your choices and decision-making as it relates to what you want viewers to experience and as it relates to the meaning of the work.
With this exhibition, I wanted to create as similar to like a home space as I could, like with a hallway and with a more like closed-in room and another hallway. Not to mimic my home exactly, because I think that would be redundant a little bit, but just to help the viewer feel as closed in, but also experiencing it similar to the way I experience it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Could you maybe choose one grouping of pieces or one individual piece if you wanted to, and maybe describe that in a little bit more specific detail, if you could?
So, okay, I'll talk about the hallway over here. I had wanted a hallway in my exhibition since I started this body of work, pretty much. It was so important to me because even though I'm not trying to recreate my home, I have very long hallways in my home. And those have been such a place of liminality and contemplation that I wanted to insert it into the space. I selected those 3 that are on the walls and above the exit door as not necessarily a triptych, I guess, because they can interact with each other, but they can also interact separately. They don't always have to be shown together. To further illustrate the threshold of the hallway there with the 2 doors on either side of it, and to further display the eerie and the uncanny that is seeing my shadow and just living above the exit door. And I was excited to use the exit door, which technically is also a part of the space, because there is no escape. You can use the door, but you shouldn't, unless there's an emergency. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
I'll take the next one. Okay, I find your personal philosophy about time very interesting. And I suspect your audience in the room does too. In your presentation, you wrote, "I subscribe to the theory that there are no fixed points in time, which means that everything that has already happened is still happening continuously. The past exists within the present." Can you select a painting or a group of paintings in this exhibition that suggests or reveals your belief in the theory of time? Please explain time in greater detail if you can.
So I think for me, the paintings that speak to time very effectively also speak about memory, and those would include the figures. So either like a specific one or just like in general, like the figures in general? Or?
I think you can choose.
Okay.
Why does the figure suggest time to you rather than the paintings without figures?
So I'll try and go outside, which is located on that wall all by itself over there.
Okay.
I think the figures speak about time and memory because that theory of time, which has yet to be proven, it's still a theory, indicates that time exists outside of how we exist. Our brains just cannot comprehend time in the way that physicists theorize that time exists. And everything is happening continuously. So with my memories, I'm in this house where I have been for so long. I have memories from all those years, and I'm still creating new memories, which I see, when I see my shadow, I'm I have to acknowledge that I exist, I'm real. So even I exist in time without knowing how time exists.
Good answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Janessa. Congratulations. With your intense sense and preference, your strong preference for privacy, why are you a painter?
I just love painting. I don't think there's anything else I could do, and that would be as fulfilling. And that's how I want to live my life.
Thank you.
So you bring up Rothko in your written thesis and your presentation. I have kind of a two-part question. Could you go into a little bit more detail, just what it is you love about Rothko's work? I know you touched on it already a bit, but if you could elaborate a little bit further.
So when I look at Rothko's work, I've been wondering about this too, thinking when I look at Rothko's work, I relate it back to the poetic image, where this is something that cannot be expressed with words, it can only be felt. And trying to put it into words might do it a disservice, even though I try, but it's just something that I think is you feel with your soul rather than your mind.
I agree, yes, okay. Considering that, looking at the body work that's here and knowing your work, over the past few years, you have these little moments where you waver away from abject realism and, just hardcore realist painting, right? And you have these little moments of abstraction. Without kind of giving my read on it, how do you kind of navigate between those? Why do you navigate between those? And then I might have one third follow-up.
So wavering between realism and abstraction.
Right.
So mostly it's because I enjoy painting so much. I enjoy like how far I can push myself like with realism, and how far I can not distort realism, but abstract it with abstraction. So it's like also instinctual when I'm painting, because like some things need to be as realistic as they can, like with the fan, for example, the giant fan above me. So especially since it is without a space around it, like a traditional like painting on canvas like those, it needs to be as real as possible, so it has that same effect that it would when it exists within a space.
Have you ever considered a body of work that is purely abstraction or purely realism? Do you need both of those in a show like this?
I think I do, because like you said, there's like those wavering moments where, I mean, literally like at the threshold, but when you're in between like one or the other, that I feel like having them both at the same time just provides that even more, so.
Fantastic.
Yes, well said. Thank you.
Were you going to ask about the liminal space, or do you want me to do that?
I have a question, but it's different than the one you and Nick discussed.
Okay, all right. Are you ready to ask yours, or can I? Okay. All right, you state that Gothic horror is about paranoia, but that your work more closely resembles existential horror. In your written thesis, you define it as a horror that produces anxieties experienced by the individual upon realizing the circumstances of their existence. The figures in your paintings exist as shadows and/or reflections. Discuss how you utilize form and color in your paintings in your attempts to address existential horror.
Yeah, so the figures are definitely, or the shadow figures are definitely a big part of that, because like I mentioned earlier in one of my answers, seeing my shadow just like viscerally reminds me that I exist. And existential fear is one of those things that only humans can experience, like the fear of death that will eventually come for us all. So that's a big part of it, because I know I will die, so someday it'll happen. And like seeing my reflection, seeing my body just reminds me of that.
I didn't have this written down, so the shadow is a ghost?
Yeah.
Okay. I think, are you the haunted or the hauntee?
I'm both.
Okay.
Thank you. With the way you're interweaving concepts of past and present, you and place, under the process experience of haunting, how many layers, how much complexity, what's your most complex thought in the interweaving of those?
I guess my most complex thought kind of just deals with not knowing how things exist. And so I literally just like cannot understand time with the brain that I have and this body. So a lot of my work and how I consider my work is like very much questioning. Like I stand at the threshold between an answer and between permanently unknowing. Does that answer your question?
It starts to, yeah.
Okay.
It's a rich thought. Thank you for sharing that. If you're haunting yourself and you're haunting these spaces, and these spaces are haunting you, how much further can that go?
It can go as far as it needs to be. Like every time I inhabit a new space, it happens all over again. So until I die, it's gonna keep on going.
Thank you.
Rick?
Sure. I have one later.
Okay, go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Janessa, I know how important poetry and the written word is to you, both as just a person and a visual artist. None of the images here, none of your paintings, ever outright illustrate any, physical language.
Yeah.
Have you, are you satisfied with that, the absence of words? Have you given any consideration to that physically manifesting, or are they completely sort of separate art forms for you?
Like incorporating my writing like physically onto my painting?
Maybe.
Okay. I have thought about that. I have tried it a few times, and right now, anything that I can think of currently isn't just working. So I just really need to take more time and consider and experiment more. So I would love to be able to do that one day. Just it's not happening right now.
Are you aware of anyone contemporary or historical who has done it in a way that you would describe as near perfect or better than your attempts?
I can't recall any like specific names. There are, I know like, I've been looking at like, is concrete poetry is like this correct term where like the letters in turn, obviously they create words, but in turn create not shapes, but they hold a different presence than just like a word written in like Times New Roman 12-point font. So I think that might be difficult in trying to do because the words themselves become the art piece rather than the painting that they would be a part of. So again,
Right.
I'm just like really trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I think coming back to some of your more minimal paintings, the one that we were looking at earlier on the big wall by itself, I think in the same way that I'm able to kind of savor the thingness of that painting without any sort of recognizable symbols. I would think that your best poetry that I've read does that.
Yeah.
So I can understand why it would be difficult to find a relationship there. This isn't a question, I apologize.
I'm thinking of Ed Ruscha,
Right.
but I'm not going to ask about Ed Ruscha.
Thank you.
Okay, back to the installation and concrete poetry, which you just brought up, which, like you said, is about the space and the pauses between words so that the whole thing becomes a visual thing. So did you have that in mind when you installed your exhibition here?
Yes, mostly in the way that like the work interacts with each other. Again, it's one of those things that the image does that I can't put into words. But it's another thing that when I look at Rothko's work, I just feel it, and it's one of those instinctual things.
So, okay, just as to maybe further clarify this for us.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the vital need for that particular painting under that particular fan, on that particular wall with nothing else on it.
As soon as I had the idea for the fan, I was like, it needs to have just one photo or one painting underneath it. The fan can stand alone, but I think with the painting beneath it, it kind of just emphasizes that uncanny, because the fan belongs in the space without being in the space, and the two are just having a nice conversation with each other like that.
Good. Thank you.
A nice conversation or a threatening conversation?
Well, it is a still fan, so I guess it's up to the viewer.
You cited several academic definitions of liminal and liminality. Without referring to notes, in what way are you personally liminal?
I'm a human. I am a soul trapped inside of a physical being.
But that's a destination. That is not liminal.
Well, one day I'll no longer inhabit this body, so therefore I'll cross the threshold into a new state of existence.
Liminality is that moment between states, threshold. You are in a distinct state now.
So then I guess that would be when I am dying. Then I will be crossing the threshold then.
Right.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Not fully.
Okay. Can you ask it again?
Yes.
Okay.
Liminality is the moment between things, when it's a hotel hallway, which is not a destination, but a hallway in a museum, a hallway in a supermarket with products with specificity that is a destination unto itself is not liminal. And since you inhabit your hallways so frequently, as per your artwork, is it losing its liminality?
No, because I'm constantly creating new memories within that hallway. So it's a recurring thing.
But that's, again, isn't that the opposite of liminality?
I don't understand.
If liminality is a moment between two different states, creating a memory is the state, is a destination. You meditate in your hallways. You don't just transit them.
Okay. Is there a question?
And so in what way are you liminal if you're meditating, if the hallways are destinations, if you're in a state that is distinct from a transitory state?
Well, in that case, I guess it just then comes down to my mind, because we are constantly growing and evolving as humans, so I'm never truly in just one state. I'm not the same person I was 5 minutes ago. So does that?
It's interesting.
I'm going to try to help you.
Okay.
Because I've thought about this as well. Back to my question about time. I think that's where this discussion, maybe this is where Jason wants you to go with the discussion. Because if liminality is that space that we occupy between two things, and your definition of time is that time is happening simultaneously through your memory, does that have something to do with it? It becomes a metaphor. Is it purgatory?
No.
It's not purgatory.
No.
Interesting. I think that's it for my questions. Do you have mine?
No, I think I'm good.
Jason, I know you do.
I'll limit it to one.
Okay.
What is your strategy to maintain or grow your practice as you transition to the next phase?
Yeah. I like physically and.
What is your strategies to maintain or grow your practice as
Okay.
you transition to the next phase?
So, I mean,
Are you going to stay an artist within?
Of course.
How are you going to stay an artist with what change?
I'm just gonna keep painting and keep making work, no matter what. I have a home studio, so that's definitely going to help me. I'm planning to look into residencies, so I'll have that community and that kind of a community that affords. And to financially sustain myself, I'll get a job, even if it doesn't involve anything with art, just anything that I can do to keep creating and stay an artist.
Would you prefer a job in the arts or a job out of the arts?
But in the arts preferably, but if it comes down to it, I'll take anything I can get. So.
Can you imagine sustaining yourself financially with your art?
It's my dream.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. At this point, I'm going to ask the audience if you have any questions for Janessa.
Look to pass the microphone.
Thank you. Hi, Janessa.
Hi, Stella.
It has been so awesome to see you, your progress, your evolution, right? And I wanted to ask you, Did you at any point experience some kind of frustration or an outcome that you did not expect or enjoy that made you discover something else that was new and exciting? Or can you tell us a little bit about perhaps the failures or the surprises that led you in a new way that was unexpected and in a positive outcome, had a positive outcome in your practice?
Yeah, so the first thing I thought of is the fan. It took me a while to get to this point. I started out with thinking about taking the figure out of my work and instead having it separate and cutting it out of paper. And it was effective, but it wasn't like, it didn't make my body of work better, if anything. It was just kind of an experiment. And so I set it aside and I was like, I really want this to work. I really still want to be able to cut something out and have it be separate. But I just didn't know how to do that. So it took a while for me to be like, oh my gosh, if I just don't do the figure, I can do one of the objects in my painting. And so, and then I was like, how cool would it be to have a giant ceiling fan? And then that's pretty much, that was very much a welcome outcome to the kind of disappointing little paper figures that I did.
Yeah, I remember those paper figures. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello. This is going to be a very what if question, so I apologize in advance for that. But something you said during your presentation struck me about you saying you're standing on a threshold between an answer and permanent unknowing. And it struck me that permanent unknowing would allow you to continue to make work like this, while an answer may change the work. So I was just wondering if you think you ever did find an answer for your relationship to time, do you think it would change fundamentally the way you make your work?
Definitely. Any sort of different like variable is going to change the outcome. I don't know what that would look like, and I don't know what I would do.
That's where the what if comes in.
Yeah. But it definitely would change it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi. You paint your childhood home that you've grown up in, and you talk about how when you inhabit new spaces, you'll sort of start the process of haunting all over again. I guess this is another like what if question, but when you start to react to like your environment and you paint those spaces, do you intend to treat them differently than you did your childhood home in terms of composition or color, or do you want those lines to blur as sort of everything becomes a liminal space that like anyone could inhabit?
Okay, like a separate environment, not my childhood home.
Yeah.
So like a public environment, for example.
Or just like a new home or like a new sort of corner that you're in.
So if it was like a public space, I've considered that, like going to the grocery store, like during my regular routine. I'm looking for things, of course, I'm always looking, but public spaces don't hold that emotional charge that my childhood home does. And so if I were to be in another like intimate private space, like another of my houses, I don't have more than one currently, but if I was in another home, or if I was even like on vacation or like in a hotel somewhere, even though it is intimate, it is still not emotionally charged enough yet, just because I haven't spent that much time as I have in my childhood home.
Definitely, thank you.
Hello.
Hi. I really loved when you're talking about the fluorescent paints and how they create their own luminosity. That's one thing that I've always loved about your work. It's like so vivid and bright, and so it was really surprising when you're talking about using like cadmium yellow light and the other like Prussian blue and the non-fluorescent colors. Do you only use fluorescent red, or do you use other fluorescents in your work?
I really only use fluorescent red. Fluorescents are not very light fast. Is that the correct term? Yeah. So they're not archival and they're not going to be around forever. So eventually these paintings aren't going to look the same way they do now. And even just like looking at my work, my earliest work in the show, I'm like, oh my gosh, it doesn't look the same. Like it's already happening. So that being said, using the red, I try to use it sparingly for that reason, but also because the fluorescent, I also use a very cheap fluorescent. It's so thin that it needs those other like heavy body acrylics like the cadmium yellow light to really be visible on the canvas or whatever I'm painting on. So.
And then I have a little another little question. Why are you so drawn to the red fluorescent with the, in comparison to all the other fluorescent colors?
Formally, I think it's like the best mixture out of like the brand that I use. I think it's like the best like formulated one. Also formally, it's red is a complementary color to green, and so since all my work, not all my work, but the majority of my work is green, then it makes it even that much more vibrant, like I'm desiring.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you. Your question, your answer to my question was very nice. Thank you.
Hi. I was looking back at your earlier work, and I noticed that within the fluorescent red, that you used a lot of white to draw out outlines of work, and you don't use it anymore. Is there a reason that you don't do outlines to anything anymore?
I just don't find it necessary anymore. I think the current way that I'm painting right now doesn't need it. And I needed it when I was doing that style of painting, mostly so because the compositions were so complicated. I needed to be able to draw it out and make sure everything was like proportionally correct. So I have gotten better. So I don't really need that right now.
Awesome.
I don't know which side it is. You talked about Rothko and getting that feeling. I get a little choked up just thinking about it. And I noticed with your work, there's different feeling that you get from the empty space versus having the figure in it. Which direction do you think you're going to go more with or explore more?
I think I haven't worked with the figure enough right now, so I would love to be able to continue pushing that as far as I can, as well as works without the figure, so both.
You talked about the mechanical whirring that the fans make. Have you ever thought about incorporating an element of sound into your work?
So aposematism touches on all the senses. So not only is it sight, it's also touch and taste and sound. And for example, you can hear rattlesnakes rattle. And so with that in mind, I would be very interested to do that in the future instead of further utilizing that term. So.
Thank you.
So Nick and I talked about this question earlier, and we decided not to ask it. Now I want to ask it. Without the corridor that you've created and without the single object that is the cutout fan, you will not have the illusion or the illusions that you're talking about. You very much need those. And when they're gone, the fan by itself is not truly an art piece unless it's put into the context of a show. So are you an installation artist?
Definitely.
Definitely. Will you elaborate a little bit?
So even installing like a canvas painting is still an installation. But I mean, obviously, this isn't just hung on the wall like traditionally. It is projected out from the wall at a certain angle. And that clearly isn't traditional. And so therefore, I become an installation artist, especially because I'm not only that, I'm also trying to recreate an experience and a feeling that I lost the word I was trying to think of. It crosses over from, or I guess it's more like ambiguous. It's in that in-between state between the two. So they both need to be here.
One illustrated, the other experienced. Good. Anyone else? Good. Well, I guess that concludes our questions.